You have accessed the podcast of OA, located deep within Sector 14845 and powered by the Emerald Light of Will. The podcast of OA is your guide to the Green Lantern universe. Hosted by Lantern Myron Rumsey, the podcast of OA begins now.
Welcome back, everyone, to episode number 128 of the podcast of OA. I'm your co-host, Myron Rumsey, and I am joined by my good friend, Phil Bova. Phil, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Myron. I'm doing great. It's been a while since we've talked. I'm glad to be back, and I know I'd like to apologize to the people listening that there's been a delay, but here we are, and we're going to rock through this one.
Absolutely. Well, it's hard being down to one book a month now. Well, two issues, but
right.
one series a month. So, and it's about to get smaller.
I know, it's so sad, so sad.
But needless to say, we do have some stuff to talk about in this episode. We want to talk about Green Lanterns number 55, and then we have a listener who's a regular in our Facebook community who has responded to the homework you gave out last episode. And then you're going to talk about Green Lantern Circle of Fire, which I'm interested to hear your thoughts about. And then we've got a little bit of news and stuff that we're going to save for the end of the episode because some of it might be spoilery.
All right, sounds good. And on a side note, I want to say hello to the fellas at Comic Book Headquarters. They're located here in the St. Louis area. Really, really great group of guys. They've been ordering stuff for me, back issues and everything, and they have always followed through with a lot of the things that I've asked for. As a matter of fact, the homework assignment that I gave some of the listeners was about Sodom Yat, and they actually ordered the Tales of the Green Lantern Corps, where his first appearance was from.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
It's we live in this day and age where everybody likes to buy off of Amazon and all that stuff, but there's something about the service you get from your local comic shop if you're fortunate enough to have one. I have a shop in my area by the name of Heroes Your Mom Threw Out at Comics, and Jared, the guy that's the owner, has always been very, very supportive of me. He always gives me a little bit of a price break, and he initially, when we started the show, he kind of gave me some seed money for some t-shirts that I could use to raise money to pay for the initial podcasting licenses and storage license and registering the domain and all that kind of stuff. And it means the world to somebody when you're trying to do something creative like that, and you get your local comic shop to really stand behind you.
It really is, and these guys have been really, really amazing. And it's kind of funny because it kind of started off when I first moved to the St. Louis area, and I needed a comic book store to go to, and and they're right down the road, 10 minutes away. And I started collecting all the Tyler Kirkham variant covers for Hal Jordan, the Green Lantern Corps, and then they'd start, they'd order them for me, and they know I'd be waiting for them when they come in, and then I started ordering. Well, it's like I want these I want the first appearance issues, like any fandom does. So Sodom Yat was one of my first ones. I wanted to get that one. That's Tales of the Green Lantern Corps Annual number 2, and that came out in '86. And then they're holding for me the Adventures of Superman 466, which is the origin story and first appearance of Hank Henshaw.
That's awesome.
I love it. Love it. So yeah, big shout out to them guys. They're on Instagram, and they do special orders and everything. So if anybody needs anything, give them a call, man. They definitely come through finding some stuff.
That's great. So let's take a quick pause. Let's come back and let's talk about Green Lanterns and kind of Hank Henshaw's big gambit here.
Looking forward to it. Love that issue.
If you're ever in the southern tier of New York and you're looking to satisfy your comic needs, head on over to Heroes Your Mom Threw Out Comic Shop, located at 128 West 14th Street in Elmira. You can also check out their website at heroesyourmomthrewout.com. Stop in and enjoy the most extensive collection of comics in the southern tier of New York. Once again, it's Heroes Your Mom Threw Out Comic Shop in Elmira, New York.
Hey guys, welcome back. Well, here we are, Myron. We're getting to talk about one of my favorite all-time villains, Hank Henshaw, Cyborg Superman. Green Lantern issue 55, written by Dan Jurgens, artist Mike Perkins. And this is Evil's Might, Part 6.
So what did you think about how Dan Jurgens crafted the story? I think it's really kind of neat what he did this issue.
It's funny because when I was reading it, the last few issues that Jurgens has done, and him bringing in Cyborg Superman, which if I remember correctly, he was the one who it first originated from him. I think he was the one who first drew Hank Henshaw. I'm not really sure. I'd have to look that up.
I think you're right. I think it was Dan.
Yeah, because this guy spawned out of the whole Death of Superman story arc. And, I love his use of them, and it's really, really unique how he's using them in this particular story arc. And I get the feeling that it's leading to something big that's going to transition into what's going to happen with the Lanterns moving forward after this series ends.
Yeah, it was really kind of neat. One of the things I really liked about the opening section of this issue was how when Henshaw arrives, the people are just really behind him. That whole that one panel where you hear them chanting Henshaw, Henshaw. It was almost like he was at a rock concert. They were that enthusiastic.
I'm more of a cult following.
yeah, exactly. And it was really kind of neat the way that came across, because I don't think they'd ever met him before. The way it sounded, the way it was implied was that they had never met him in person.
No, and Jurgens really gives him a lot of depth in this storyline. I mean, it's just his resonance as a character. You can really feel how deep and emotionally attached he is to the anger that he has for the Green Lantern Corps itself, especially the Guardians.
Yeah. The one thing, let me ask your opinion on this one. In reading this, I'm trying to figure out what Henshaw's motivations are. Obviously, we know he has history with the Green Lantern Corps, but why do you think he's siding with the Ravagers and using Eon solely because of the injustice he feels was done to them by the Green Lanterns before, or do you think there's something else behind it?
I think I don't know. This is just spitballing it here, but I've been thinking a lot about this, harkening back to the whole when Coast City was destroyed by him and Mogul back when Hal Jordan went nuts and started killing. You remember after theirs, he went kind of crazy and went killing on a killing spree through all the Green Lantern Corps. But I think I don't know. For some reason, I keep thinking it's going to harken back to that incident. For some reason, I don't know why. Because I get this just that Jurgens is writing some kind of end all for this particular book, because we're going to be transitioning into Grant Morrison's work, and the stuff that I've read with Grant Morrison, it just seems like it's Hal Jordan centered at the very beginning, and from what I understand, it begins with him, kind of being lost and being on Earth and not really having a place. And here he specifically, Hal Jordan has a place right now. So I get the feeling there's something big coming, and Cyborg Superman's going to be the head of it.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what's going on. I mean, obviously part of, when I interviewed Dan Jurgens in the last episode, part of that was, he said, part of his goal is not only does he got to write a story that he finds satisfying to write and a story he wants to tell, but he has to transition the universe to get ready for the Grant Morrison section. And we know where Jon Stewart's landing, we know where Jessica Cruz is landing, and we kind of now know where Kyle Rayner's landing, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later.
Sure.
We don't know about Guy, and we don't know for certain if any of those characters are really going to be in that state based on what's going on in Heroes in Crisis. And again, we'll talk about that a little bit later in the episode. It's interesting to see what's happening, but yeah, you're right. This is how we get from here. We only got 2 issues left. How we get from here to Grant Morrison's run, where it feels like Hal's the only guy, and it seemed to me back when they were doing the convention coverage, one of the websites made a comment that it was stated that Hal was only one of 2 human Green Lanterns. So I don't know really what's going on. It's going to be interesting to see between this and Heroes in Crisis and Doomsday Clock. I'm not sure exactly what's going to happen in the future. It makes you feel like something big is going to happen. That's for sure.
Well, not only that, they got to find a spot for Simon Baz, and nothing solicits where he's going to be at. There's not. Have you heard anything of where he's going to, or?
No, I haven't, and that's part of the speculation that comes out of Heroes in Crisis #1, and which again we'll talk about a little bit later.
Okay.
But yeah, we don't know where some of these characters are going to land, and we don't know where the Green Lantern takes place in terms of timeline. Is it a little bit further down the road to give time for some of these other books to finish up certain storylines? I don't know. That DC continuity has kind of been a strange thing these days, where you don't know what takes place in what order. I mean, if we look at when Dan Jurgens' first part of this story came out, it came out before Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps ended, yet it chronologically takes place afterwards. So almost anything's on the table, I think, at this point, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, you hate to see what's gonna fall wayside because they showed Kilowog and of course Rayner was in this issue too, and Jessica Cruz and all, and I'm gonna miss seeing these guys together. I even though it wasn't like a full swath of Green Lantern Corps, I'm gonna miss all these guys being together in books, and to see them they're gonna be scattered now. It just kind of makes you believe that the Green Lantern Corps itself is coming to an end, and I don't know. I have a feeling it's going to be spread out, or it's going to be disbanded by some point, especially with what Cyborg Superman did, infecting the main central battery, and with his Phantom Ring. It just seems like something's going to happen to where, they're going to become scattered, and they may be where the storyline goes, to where they put all these characters out there and then readdress them later on down the line,
Yeah, I mean, Henshaw really has managed to achieve something that I don't think anybody else really has accomplished before. I mean, here you see him coming through the Green Lantern power battery, and he's got the Phantom Ring, and he reveals himself, and now the Guardians realize that they've been duped, and that Simon Baz isn't guilty of stealing the Phantom Ring. Obviously, Cyborg Superman is. And he's managing to infect all of the power rings at once, and it falls back to it. It's really kind of an elegant solution for Dan Jurgens to figure out, what do I do with the fact that Hal Jordan has a ring that's completely different from everybody else's, and of course his is the one that's not affected.
Right. And what better tool to use than Cyborg Superman? I mean, he hasn't been around for a while. I mean, he was haphazardly used in Supergirl for a while, I think, and then of course before that he wasn't really around that much, and of course he was big in the Sinestro Corps War, and that was really a big story arc where he was a significant player in it. It's nice to see him come back and get this panel time. I mean, but then again, I'm biased. I really like him as a character. I've always liked him as a villain, and he's one of my favorites. Him and Black Hand have always been my favorite Green Lantern villains.
I think that Jeff Johns did a really neat job of giving Hank Henshaw some real pathos, and that whole storyline. And I think we talked about it in the last episode about what the only thing he really wants is for someone to destroy him and for him to stay dead, and that's pretty powerful.
It really is, and I don't know. I haven't heard any solicits mention his name moving forward either. So there's no telling what he's going to come to an end as, or if he's just going to disappear again. But like you said, when it comes to the DC Comics universe, you never can tell what they're going to do with these characters, and they're always leaving fans guessing. But that's all part of the fun.
Yeah, the speculation is always fun, and sometimes you have to wait to see how the story unfolds. I want to ask you a particular question because I want to see what you think about this one panel. There's a panel where you kind of see the Ravagers attacking Mogo, and there's explosions, and you see John Stewart there. And there's a character who says John, and you don't see, it's a silhouette. That's it. Do you have any ideas of who you think it might be? I've got an idea in my head, but I want to hear what you think.
What page are you on here?
I'm not sure what page number it is, but it's it's a little bit over halfway through the book, and it's a panel where the Ravagers have just shot at Mogo, and there's an explosion near the medical center. And it kind of lays waste to the whole medical center, and you see the Stygian doctor there in the ground, and you see John's body lying there in kind of a bad state.
Oh, yeah, I know what you're talking about right there. It says, exceed the reality of what you truly are.
That's the panel. And you see the guy there that says John's name.
I don't know. I couldn't say. Maybe Simon Baz?
That's where I was going with it, yeah.
He'd be the only one I could think of that would even remotely be there and would know who he is,
Yeah, I don't know how he would have gotten there. That was the big thing in my mind. I'm sitting there thinking, geez, why is he in silhouette? And he looks, because you can't see any hair detail or anything.
Sure.
So it could be Simon's funky mask that he's got, his little cowl thing he wears. It could be that. Did he maybe somehow use the Justice League teleporter to teleport to Mogo? I don't know. And I was wondering what thoughts you had. And I was wondering, well, geez, I know I'm a little crazy. How crazy am I? And either you're just as crazy as I am, or we're both really sane and got it right. I don't know.
That would be a trip if it was right. I mean, he's the only one that comes to mind in that particular sequence right there.
Yeah, it was the only thing I could think of too, and I thought, boy, that's kind of neat that he'll be there because he doesn't have a ring, and Hal's ring is immune, so now Hal's got somebody that can help him.
Well, and also, leading up to the ending of the story of this particular issue, the Green Lanterns don't have a home planet anymore. I mean, Mogo's been compromised, and Oa's obviously gone and written out of the whatever you want to call it. And then if all these rings are infected, and in fact the central battery is infected, I mean, Hal Jordan is the only one that's immune. So you kind of got to wonder if I haven't read Justice League Odyssey yet, so I'm not sure how Jessica functions in that book, but I wonder how these guys are going to function without the central battery, let alone not having a home planet anymore if Mogo goes wayside.
Right. Well, the only thing I know about Odyssey, I haven't read it myself yet, but what I've heard is that Jessica is apparently in one of the, I think it was No Justice. There was a whole story where a pocket universe or galaxy was opened up and a number of planets are there, and it was named the Ghost Sector. And apparently Jessica is the Green Lantern of that sector.
Huh, that's interesting. Well, and she's still essentially powered by, quote unquote, the power ring, which is just a byproduct. I guess with the Green Lantern ring, it's just a byproduct of the power ring. So it may even revert back to that energy source.
Right,
especially if it's a different universe, a different multiverse.
And I don't know whether, obviously in my mind, Odyssey takes place after the conclusion of Green Lanterns. So, it implies that she no longer has Simon Baz as a partner.
Yeah. So I wonder what's going to happen to him.
Yeah.
I've never been a big Baz fan myself, and I hate to see any character go because, fandom's been pretty up in arms with the way things have been treated lately. But I hate to see any character go if anybody likes them. I'm not trying to step on them and everything. I'm trying to essentially think about what they could do with all these characters and where they're going to fit them in at. And unfortunately, I just don't know where he would fit in at, even in another book or even in a crossover title.
Yeah, and we'll talk about character deaths when we get to Heroes in Crisis again.
Right.
But I agree. As somebody who, Hal is my guy, and seeing him go through what happened with Emerald Twilight and then the Spectre and Final Night and gosh, what they did with him in Zero Hour, I'm very sensitive to the fact that every one of these characters is somebody's favorite character.
Sure.
And at the same time, we've got too many Earth Lanterns. We really do.
We really do, and there's no space for them. I guess you could use one or two as a second or third tier character in another title, but even that brings the question. Where do they fit? Guy Gardner essentially, where would he fit at? What can you think of another title that DC puts out where he'd even remotely fit?
Right.
And Simon Baz, he's only been written with Jessica Cruz most of the time, so he hasn't really had a lot of crossover paths with Hal Jordan for any extended period, Guy Gardner, or any other character for that matter, besides Jessica Cruz.
Yeah, he's had little things here and there. I think, back during Godhead, he and Guy Gardner kind of got along, which is why when Sam Humphrey started writing Simon having this big problem with Guy, I kind of questioned it because, they seemed to get along pretty well from what we saw.
Sure.
But yeah, Simon's biggest relationship other than Jessica has been Badge.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right.
But what do you think about Mogo in this issue? There's this one panel, it's the next page after the one a couple pages after what we were just talking about, where you hear this loud noise come from Mogo, and Hal says, "Was that a death scream?" Do you think that they killed Mogo, or do you think that's something else going on?
Well, see, that's just it. If Jurgens is leading this up to be kind of an end point, well, just use that. I'll use that loosely for just to try to step on any fans out there, but kind of an endpoint for the Green Lantern Corps, or the main characters anyway. It would make sense why Mogo would fall wayside, but again, that just brings up the question: if that's the case, then obviously these lanterns aren't going to have any place to go anymore, which leads me to my theory that they're going to end up being scattered, or they're going to be disbanded at some point.
Well, the way this issue ends, it certainly gives you reason to think that the Guardians in a real bad way, because the Guardians are all laid out on the ground, unconscious and or dead.
I mean, those guys haven't been effective. I can't even remember the last time they were effective in a story arc. I mean, they're just the Guardians. I don't even know how I would write them if I was ever a comic book writer. You know, they're just irrelevant characters to the Green Lantern Corps at this point. And they used to be really, really big back in the early issues. You know, they used to be a dominant force. It's sad the way they're treated now.
Yeah, you know, I think I like them better back when they were written as a bit more altruistic, but a little out of touch with the common man, if that makes sense. That to me, I thought was better. You know, they weren't misguided, but they clearly were so emotionally disconnected from everyone that they couldn't relate to the problems of an everyday person. You know, back to the times when, you know, they'd complain that Hal Jordan spent too much time on Earth and they made him leave Earth for a year and that kind of thing. Or, you know, Hal would call him on the carpet for making decisions that didn't take into account what's right, just what they felt made sense cosmically from their 10 million mile perspective. And I do miss those Guardians because you had a reverence for them, you respected them, even though you knew that they didn't understand the human condition enough sometimes to be relatable. You know what I mean?
They were kind of like the senior council, you know, and it's like now there's no credibility with them. I mean, they've lost all credibility when it comes to the Lanterns. I mean, nobody believes them anymore. I mean, even when they talk, it's like it's skeptical at best the way their orders are taken, and half the time nobody's listening to them anyway.
Yeah, if I have a criticism about the Jeff Johns run, it is how he treated the Guardians near the end, because he did turn them into bad guys, and nobody has been able to really turn that around for them to get their credibility back. Where's their redemption? And I don't see that happening anytime soon.
No, I don't either. Especially with we only got 2 issues left of this. Yeah, now there's not much screen time left to see where all these characters are going to go. So I don't know. Well, I hate to say it, but we'll see.
Yeah, I don't know. You know, the only downside I thought about this plot is after I got into reading it, I thought, you know, if Hank Henshaw could do this, why didn't he do it during the Sinestro Corps War?
Well, you got to think about it like this. Maybe he's advanced in a certain way. He wasn't advanced back then. Maybe he's learned a thing or two since then. And not only that, he's got a hold of a phantom ring. So maybe that's some kind of, like, I don't know, supercomputer that's, I don't know, giving him some kind of self-conscious. I don't know.
Yeah, I kind of think that, you know, he's been laying in wait and developing himself and evolving in some way. That's the only way I could get it across in my head. And I think he's been spying on the Green Lanterns for some time, because how else would he know about the Phantom Ring?
Exactly. And you know, and you get the sense of his lead-up story going up to this point, especially this last panel, that this has been coming for a long time, and that he's had this planned out for a very, very long time, because he's predictive in nature with everything that's happening in this whole entire book. I mean, he knows what's coming. He knows how to react. So it's really curious how smart he is in this. And I love when they use his costume like they did from Sinestro Corps War.
Yeah, I thought that was a nice callback.
Yeah, that's cool.
I really like this story. I know there's a lot of people that don't like it because it's not back to the intimate Simon Baz, Jessica Cruz book, but I'm digging it as somebody who's a Green Lantern Corps fan, seeing this kind of a story end out the run of essentially the Green Lantern version of the Green Lantern corner of DC Rebirth. Oh yeah,
it's top notch, and it really does. It really does Venditti's run justice. You know what I mean? Like with especially with them using Zod. You know, and then of course you enter this story arc, and they're now using Cyborg Superman, and those are 2 crucial characters that were in the Superman universe, and it's really cool to see him excel here.
Yeah, I agree. I'm looking forward to the last 2 issues. I'm interested in seeing how Dan Jurgens is going to wrap it up and where the status quo is going to be at that point. It's interesting just to think that this run is ending and the Hal Jordan book ended, and we're going to get something completely new that I'm excited about, but I'm also nervous about. So, you know, we'll see what happens.
I am too. I'm the same way. I'm a little nervous going into it myself, because we're in store for something completely different than what we've been used to. And you know, you and I have been reading it for a long time, as a lot of other fans have. And you know, it's taking that step into something that somebody's doing that's, number one, never been done before, but also just kind of goes against what's been done in the past, you know, how many years leading up to this point.
Yeah, I consider it a nervous excitement at this point.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
All right, sir. Well, let's take a quick break, and we'll come back, and we will do some listener feedback.
All right, sounds great.
The Island, a comic, sci-fi, fantasy, pop culture podcast. I'm Dan.
I'm Matt.
And if you like spoiler-free
And spoiler-full
discussions, then you definitely want to check out this podcast. We cover The Flash,
Black Lightning,
Supergirl,
Legends of Tomorrow,
Stranger Things,
Legion,
The Gifted,
Gotham,
Walking Dead,
Fear the Walking Dead,
Westworld.
Game of Thrones.
So don't forget to check us out on all of your popular podcast apps.
Okay, Myron. Well, we got some listener feedback, and I had like a quote-unquote homework assignment for some of the listeners out there for one of my favorite lanterns, Sodom Yat. Big fan of the guy. So let's find out if anybody's responded. What do you got?
So we got an email from Jesse Stewart, and Jesse is an active part of the Blog of OA Facebook community, and he responded to the homework assignment that you dished out. So let me read you what he says. He says, "Hi, Myron and Phil. Enjoying the podcast. I'm an episode or two behind, though. I just finished listening to 126, Snowblind. First, it's been a while since I've written, so I want to welcome Phil to the podcast. Also give my best wishes to Bill and whatever endeavors he's now undertaking. I wanted to follow up to Phil's homework for us. The last time we've seen Sodom Yat, as far as I can recall, was in the Uprising story arc, where the Green Lanterns were at war with the Durlans. Sodom Yat last appeared in issue number 32 of the Green Lantern Corps, cover dated August 2014. After being rescued from the Durlans by the Green Lantern Corps, he chose to stay behind on Daxam rather than rejoin the Corps. This was during Van Jensen's run on Green Lantern Corps. Keep up the good work, guys. I can't wait to experience Grant Morrison's take on the Green Lantern with you. I'm sure it will be full of outer space and multiversal wackativity, my new favorite word. Even if he does keep his focus on Sector 2814. It is a big sector after all. I am a bit worried after reading the interview in DC Nation number 4 that he's going to undo a lot of the character development Hal had under Jeff Johns and Robert Venditti. Also, it's a shame that Dan Jurgens is only getting 7 issues on Green Lanterns. I'm really enjoying that story arc. Sincerely, Jesse Stewart.
Yeah, I second that notion. It would have been good to see Jurgens on, 10 or 20 issues just to see how much he could have done with development too.
Yeah, Jesse's recollection of what happened with Sodom Yat lines up with what I thought too. I couldn't remember the issue numbers, so thank you, Jesse, for giving us that information. Speaking of the Green Lantern run, there was a story that came out earlier this week where there was an interview with Grant Morrison and some preview pages in Entertainment Weekly, and it's interesting. His take on Hal is interesting in that he thinks that Hal's the kind of guy who wouldn't really have many earthly possessions because once you experience life in the greater universe, kind of all that stuff seems simple and mundane. Mm-hmm. And almost like he sees being on Earth as a downer compared to life out in the universe. And there was a couple things in those preview pages that I thought were rather interesting. And one was that Hal in those preview pages talks about charging his ring, which we know the ring he's been wearing currently doesn't require a lantern to charge because it's tied right into willpower. So that was interesting. And the other thing was that it mentioned OA.
See, and I've always been a big fan of OA. Well, I mean, of course, podcast of OA and all that, but I mean, I've always been a big fan of OA, and I always wish they would have brought that back for at some point, but obviously with it being gone and them with the use of Mogo over the past how long now, I don't know. I hope they return that to the Lantern mythos. I would like to see it redevelop, or I would like to see it come back at some point.
Well, it certainly implies it from those preview pages. The other thing that was interesting was there was a scene there that echoes Showcase 22 and Finding Abin Sur in the desert, where Hal finds Chrysalon in the desert. And Chrysalon it's interesting because Chrysalon is of the same species as Chazalon, who is a long-time member of the Corps, who presumably died during Blackest Night. And Chrysalon showed up in the Justice League animated series. He's never been in a comic book before. So I think it's interesting that Morrison is kind of grabbing that piece out of the animated series. And it makes me wonder if the Chazalon type character who's appeared in the background of the entire Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps run, and I think even back to Green Lantern Edge of Oblivion, I think he was in that series too, and he's appeared in the background of Green Lanterns. Is that Chazalon or is it Chrysalon at this point?
Well, and I think you and I think, went back and forth on Twitter the other day with somebody about that, and I think I remember mentioning that he's always had a connection to the Book of Oa, which I haven't heard any mention of the Book of Oa since Oa's been gone.
Right.
At least not that I can recall, anyway. So I mean, maybe that's Morrison's way of bringing in a character that has some kind of connection to Oa in general, and then maybe, who knows? Maybe out of that develops Oa coming back, and however they do it, who knows? I mean, Grant Morrison, his writing has always been ethereal, so yeah, I'm sure he can come up with some pretty good stuff.
Yeah, I think if I have any concern, it's that in the comments about Hal being kind of an idiot savant, kind of not able to function on Earth, which is not really what Gil Kane and John Broome invented for that character. A test pilot was, back in the old days, was somebody who was on par with an astronaut and was scientifically smart and so on. And the Hal we've gotten since the Jeff Johns era is obviously not that. He's much more Chuck Yeager, fly by the seat of your pants.
Sure.
So if I have any reservation, I think it's in that kind of stuff. I know that the stuff that Grant does is often, as Jesse says, some multiversal wackativity.
Exactly.
And I'm sure it's going to be one of those mind-bending kind of stories here and there. It's interesting that Grant Morrison has said that, he had the first 12 issues kind of already mapped out, but he's got ideas for more. So I think contrary to what was reported and speculated by a couple of comic book websites that it was going to be a 12-issue series, I think Grant Morrison is on for longer than that.
And when it makes sense, I mean, he's a good writer. I mean, he's done a lot of stuff. I mean, he was the one who wrote a lot with the Kyle Rayner character back in the the 90s. We talked about that, and he's been around for a while, so he knows some of the mythos. I think I'm with you about how I hope they don't undo the characterization of Hal Jordan to a good extent. I mean, I always see Hal Jordan as being this fast-paced. He's in a fast-paced position all the time. I mean, it's always go, go, go. For him to go back to Earth, of course, you got to think about it. It's going to slow down considerably because, I mean, you're basically putting the brakes on. It kind of like it was when he was on when he was Rogue. He kind of had more time to think, and he had more time to develop outside of being in that fast-paced Green Lantern Corps, always the big event, always the big war, the earth-ending scenarios all the time. I don't know, maybe this is just Grant Morrison's way of keeping him more grounded and more heavy-footed and finding people that he can reattach to. And hopefully Carol Ferris will show up at some point. I'd like to see her back.
Yeah, there was an allusion to Carol Ferris and some of the other females from Hal's past showing up in the book. And, I don't want to see him looking like, I don't know. I don't want him to see this person who's inept in functioning in society.
Sure.
That to me is a colossal step backwards. And so, if there's any reservation I have, it comes from things that imply to me that there's that kind of stuff going on. Obviously, you can't judge it until it comes out and you actually get a chance to read it.
Exactly. Which is, that's what we're here for. And, I think he's going to do the character justice. And, I mean, let's be real here. Liam Sharp on pens is just, his art's going to be incredible on this.
Yeah, some of those interior pages they showed of one of the cities in space that you see in one of the issues, I think it's the second issue, and some of that stuff is just, I can't wait to see it in color and see it come to life. It just looks amazing. Some of it is. I know he's taken some criticism for some proportions on characters and so on, and everybody's got the things that they like and they dislike about certain artists. And I can deal with some of that stuff really not being too much of a problem.
As long as they don't come at it. The bad part about that is these fans, go hard on the writers and go hard on the artists. And it's like, these guys are drawing what their rendition of the characters is. You and I would do the same thing. And of course, we're open for criticism too. But I think fandom gets a little bit too. They get too much. They're a little too extra when it comes to it, and they don't know when to rein it in.
Yeah. I was fairly critical of Billy Tan when he was on the Green Lantern book. And I really did not like his character designs for Hal. I didn't like how he drew a lot of those things. And I didn't, there's one thing to be critical of it, and it's another thing to be rude about it. And
exactly.
But, I have respect for creators, even though I may disagree with some of their decisions and some of the things they do. And when I'm doing a review and I'm talking about it, I'll talk about what I like and dislike and why I may dislike something. But I would never go to the artist and say, hey, you suck,
Yeah, right. How rude is that? These guys are doing us a service, and all they got to do is say, you know what, forget it, I'm done, I don't want to draw this anymore, or I don't want to write this anymore, and then you lose good people. It's been done before. It's really sad what fandom is doing these days, but hey, we're gonna go right through it with our positivity.
That's right. We're here for the long haul.
Right, and thank you, Jesse, for doing the little homework on Sodom Yat. Great character. I hope at some point to see him. Of course, who knows where he's at these days? He's probably hanging out wherever he's hanging out. Which, by the way, on a side note for that, I was doing some research into Sodom Yat's character, and they were supposed to use his character later on in another book that was supposed to be written by Alan Moore, and I'll have to send you the link on it. And it was a really, really good story arc that took place in the future. And at one time, there was a place called the House of Lanterns. And it talked about the different lanterns that were involved in that particular place. It was really, really interesting. It was a story arc that got nixed by DC, apparently. And, of course, that's that whole Alan Moore, DC turmoil. Who knows what's going on with their relationship. But apparently this particular series got nixed. But there was some tidbits and information that were released about it, and a couple of people did some research into it and hashed it out on what it was supposed to develop. And it's a really, 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 really cool story arc. I'll send you the link on it, and we can put it on your website, and maybe people can check it out. It's really interesting.
Was that the Twilight of the Superheroes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So cool. It was a great idea.
Yeah, that would have been interesting to see what it would have turned out as.
But apparently he was supposed to use Sodom Yat at some point in that series moving forward, because Sodom Yat was supposed to be one of the ultimate lanterns. Of course, and I don't know if anybody knew this, and you probably knew this, he's a Daxamite, which is a descendant of Kryptonian, the Kryptonian.
Right.
So anyway, I thought that was really interesting when I was starting to go down my rabbit hole with the Sodom Yat fandom. So
isn't that funny? Though what happens though as a fan is you get interested in something, and then you pursue it to the nth degree to find out every little tidbit you can find out.
And it's like, you click on one thing and it sends you to another, and then another, and then another, and eventually you're sitting there for 2 hours at your computer going, my gosh, where did I begin and where did I end?
and then you hear the rooster crowing outside, and
exactly.
All right, well, let's take a quick break, and then you're going to tell us all about Green Lantern Circle of Fire.
All right, I'm on it.
This is Giancarlo Volpe, producer of Green Lantern, the animated series, and you're listening to the podcast of OA.
Well, if you've been listening to the podcast of OA over the last several episodes, we've been doing what we call retro reviews, where we've been going back and talking about some stories and plot lines and miniseries that either left an impact on us personally or something that we liked in particular because of what it did for the Green Lantern mythology. So this episode, Brother Phil is going to lead us in some discussion about Green Lantern Circle of Fire. And it was funny. I remember when that storyline came out, the first thing I thought of is, why didn't somebody think to name it Ring of Fire?
That's true.
But anyway, Phil, why don't you lead into the conversation about Circle of Fire? I'm going to call it Ring of Fire now. I'm stuck.
All right. Well, I wanted to choose a Kyle Rayner story, a specific Kyle Rayner story, because I am a Kyle Rayner fan. I really like him. I don't. His character. They've done so much with his character over the years. And he's been through a lot. And unfortunately, I don't think he really gets recognized for that. So that said, going back to Circle of Fire, the reason why I chose that was because it's a resonance of him as an artist, as a character, because lo and behold, this bad guy shows up from some of the comic books that he's drawn, which I thought was an interesting take on the story arc. Now you read had you read the first one, or you flipped through it, right? You took a look at some of it, so you're familiar with some of the storyline, right?
I'm familiar with some of the story now. Now, I did not read this story when it first came out. I had left comics a couple of years into the Kyle Rayner era just because it wasn't doing it for me personally, and so I left comics altogether for a while. So I don't have a lot of the Kyle Rayner era stories. Okay. I have some of them, like I have the Emerald Knight story when Hal came back and the young Hal meets Kyle, finds out his fate, that kind of thing. So I didn't have these issues, but I did go out and buy the floppies of the main book. I didn't buy all of the offshoots because there were a number of one shot or two issue offshoots of this with Kyle tag teamed with different Green Lanterns that come out of the story, and that I didn't do.
Gotcha. So Oblivion is the main bad guy. Apparently, Kyle Rayner wrote a storyline in one of his comic books, and Oblivion was one of the main bad guys he wrote about. So Oblivion, of course, attacks Ron, the planet Ron, where Adam Strange is from. And then, of course, Adam Strange gets away and comes to Earth, and the typical warning the Earthlings that there's something evil coming, which seems to be the mantra of the whole comic book world. What I thought was interesting about the storyline is the use of, I don't know, it felt like a revisit. So you have of course his girlfriend during that time frame died. Of course, the big issue where she was stuffed in a refrigerator, the big controversial image that was. I think it was Alexander DeWitt,
yeah.
Yeah. And I thought it was interesting how they brought her back in this one, but she was from a different timeline, which kind of is cool because they're still touching on it, and there still exists this whole multiverse concept, and that was even back then during the 90s when this stuff was written.
Yeah, wasn't she in a situation where in her timeline she got the power ring instead of Kyle, and Kyle was the one that was murdered?
Right. And another cool part was the Spectre showing up, and of course, back then it wouldn't have been James Corrigan, it would have been the noteworthy Hal Jordan, and it was really, really cool their interaction, because Kyle Rayner didn't know who the Spectre was at the time, but they did show that split image where he was telling Kyle to move forward, see through this, you are the key, you will figure this out. And then, of course, Kyle doubts himself because that's what he used to do all the time and still does. And then it was neat because then the next panel shows him taking off his hood, and it's Hal Jordan. And it really, really shows Hal Jordan at his Hal Jordan moment, because, I mean, he was a good character, and his characterization and how he was written back then, I always thought he was a leader. Even when he went off the deep end, he's still a leader. And it really, really showed when he was the entity of the Spectre, which, by the way, was one of my favorite Hal Jordan moments, was when he was the Spectre. I really liked him.
It was pretty neat. One of the things I liked about this particular story was how the Green Lanterns that Kyle teams with, each one of them kind of represents a part of Kyle's personality, because Oblivion represents his self-doubt in the negative part of his personality. So his ring kind of conjures up these other versions of characters to represent the positive side, and I thought that was kind of neat.
Yeah, and they bring in these different lanterns from the future. They had the kids corps, like a kids Green Lantern corps or whatnot, and I like the use of all the intermediate the outside characters like Adam. I like seeing Adam in there, and then it was really, really unique the way they used Scarecrow and Dr. Psycho. It was all these different characters that were playing out, and you don't see a lot of these guys anymore. Of course, Scarecrow you see over in Batman, I'm sure, but you don't see a lot of these guys anymore. And Adam Strange, they don't use him a lot these days. But I liked it. I thought it was a really, really good arc, and it really, really brought back the whole the whole Green Lantern mythos. I felt, you got Oa involved, and I miss Oa. I still miss Oa to this day. And then, of course, you got Alexander DeWitt, and it was nice to see how their relationship was, even though Kyle was familiar with the fact that she had died, and he had to struggle with that throughout. On top of the fact that he had to struggle with taking the blame or taking the brunt of what he thought was initially his fault with Oblivion, showing up, which,
right,
as it turned, really wasn't. So,
this is also one of the only times that the late artist Norm Breyfogle drew a Green Lantern book.
That's not the same Breyfogle that just passed away, is it?
Yes, it is.
It is. Gosh, I that popped up on my Twitter feed the other day, and I was like, man, that name sounds familiar. I was like, I know his name from somewhere, and lo and behold, this is it, because I finished reading this a few days ago, and just to revisit it. But man, that's a shame. That's a shame. That's a real shame.
There was kind of a callback to this story too in Green Lantern New Guardians. At one point near the end of it was actually the final arc of the series, Justin Jordan kind of brought back Oblivion. It wasn't the same Oblivion, but they brought back an Oblivion that represented Kyle's inner subconscious. So it was kind of neat that they found a way to kind of bring it back without recycling it.
Huh, that's really interesting. I didn't pick up on that. But anyway, Circle of Fire, it's a good issue. Of course, all these characters that play out in the storyline return to Kyle's mind, and eventually Kyle tricks Oblivion into returning to his own mind and on his terms. And then it's a happy ending for everybody.
Very cool.
I highly recommend it. If anybody's a Rayner fan out there, I recommend it. I mean, the art's really, really good. It's not bad. It's decent, and the writing is great. I mean, it's Brian K. Vaughan, and he's written some really, really good stuff, and I've always liked some of his work. So. And
you said this is out in trade, correct?
Yeah, there is a couple trade copies of it. So, yeah, if anybody wants to hit me up on my email, I can see if I can shoot them an email. I have a digital of it, so I mean, we can share it like that if we need to.
All right. So I want to talk a little bit about some Green Lantern news that I'm saving for the end because it's spoilery, and this will give people a chance to skip over certain parts of the show without missing a whole lot. So let's take a quick break, and we'll come back and we'll talk about some different things that are going on in the DC and Green Lantern universes.
Great. Sounds great, Myron.
This is Salak, Green Lantern of Sector 1418, and you are receiving the podcast of Oa.
The podcast of Oa.
Well, Phil, we've got some things I want to chat about here at the end of the episode, and some of it's a little spoilery, some isn't. But I want to start out with a little bit of Blog of Oa news. I'm partnering with Cryptozoic Entertainment. There is a deck building game coming out called Rivals, Green Lantern versus Sinestro. And it is a competitive 1 versus 1 deck building card game based off of the same engine that they use for their DC deck building game. And this game comes out in October, and they have sent me 2 copies. One is a review copy, and one is one we're going to give away. So I just want to give people the opportunity to know that watch, if you're following us on Twitter or you're in the Facebook group, watch those 2 locations and the Blog of Oa for an article, a video review of the game, and a link to a contest. Well, I shouldn't say contest, a giveaway, where you can enter for an opportunity to win a copy of the game, because I've got 2 copies of it sitting here now. One I've got busted open to do my review with, and the other one is pristine and still wrapped in plastic that I am going to happily send to one of our listeners or readers in the continental United States to enjoy the game for free.
So, question for you. Now, you said it goes on sale in October.
Yep.
Do you know the retail cost of it by chance?
It's about $20.
I want to buy one right now. So I want to check this out because I was really, really stoked when I heard about it, when you would mention it or when you were posting about it or whatnot. So, yeah, I'm totally in on this. I want to get me a copy in a bad way.
I've played a couple of games of it, and I quite like it. It does a good job of capturing the mythology and the feel of fight, Hal versus Sinestro. It's almost a Green Lantern Corps Sinestro Corps fight. It's almost Sinestro Corps War at a card game.
Now, what's the main pack come with?
It basically, and it's an all-in-one self-inclusive game, but it comes with hero cards and villain cards to represent Hal and Sinestro as the leaders of their two groups. And then there are decks of cards. There's a deck of cards that you... have you ever played a deck builder at all, Phil?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
So I'm an opposite of this, but I want to play. That's why I want to try to pick this one up.
So let me try to encapsulate it. So a deck building game is you and I both start with the same cards. It's a small deck of cards. It's 10 cards. Okay. And there is a tableau of 5 cards out in the field that have different point costs. And in our turn, we will draw a 5-card hand, and you'll have a number of points that you can spend to buy more cards. So you're, in essence, spending power that you generate through the cards in your hand to buy other cards to build your customized deck.
Okay, makes sense.
And as you're building your deck, you're gaining more power and abilities, and eventually one side attacks the other, and the idea is to knock out the other side 3 times in the game. But you're doing things like you're adding, for example, there are hero and villain cards. So there are a lot of cards representing the Green Lantern Corps members. There are a lot of cards representing Sinestro Corps members. There are cards that represent power batteries, that kind of thing. So it's all tied into the lore. There are construct cards. So you create you create constructs to battle each other with. And
that's really cool.
Yeah, as you go. So let's say it's my first turn and I've got 3 points to spend, because there are cards in your hand that are a detriment to have, that weaken you, and there are cards that give you power. And let's say I spend my 3 power to buy a card. All those cards go in my discard pile, and when I finish up the cards that I have in my deck, everything that's in my discard pile gets shuffled to create a new deck. So over the rounds, your deck keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, giving you more and more abilities. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. I see it. That's really cool.
It's a lot of fun. I've played a couple different deck building games. I'm really big into board games and stuff. So I was excited when this came out. It's not the first Green Lantern board game by any such stretch of the imagination. There's a couple other ones out there, but I was really excited for this one because I enjoy the DC deck building game. And I play that quite a bit, and I love they made a Blackest Night Crisis pack for it. So you basically, the deck building game is you're kind of more cooperative than being against each other. It's not competitive. It's a cooperative game, and you're playing against different villains, and they have these crisis cards that tie Blackest Night. It kind of creates a pseudo version of Blackest Night for you to fight with. And my nephew and I always play. He's a big Flash fan, so we always play the Brave and the Bold. I'm Hal, and he's Barry, and we're taking on the bad guys. So this is
very cool.
This is a competitive game, which is a lot of fun, and it'll be out in October, and we're going to be giving a copy away, so I'm really excited for that. We're partnering with Cryptozoic for that one. But for those of you who haven't read Doomsday Clock number 7 or Heroes in Crisis number 1, this is the part of the episode where if you don't want to be spoiled, you're going to want to skip to the end of the episode, because we need to talk about a couple things that are going on in these 2 books right now, because there's some Green Lantern stuff related. So for those of you that haven't read yet and don't want to be spoiled, we'll see you next time. But Phil and you and I need to talk first about Heroes in Crisis, and there's obviously been a lot of reaction to this first issue because of what happens in it and the number of character deaths. And as you'd expect, there's a lot of negative reaction over the characters that were killed off. Mainly a lot of reaction to the apparent death of Wally and Connor.
Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, I don't understand. Well, I guess I need to say this lightly. It's Tom King's vision of a book that, I mean, this is supposed to be what, 12 issues, or is it 6? Or you know?
It was going to be 6. It's now going to be 9.
9. Okay, so keep in mind, I don't know. I feel bad when people jump all over something right away without knowing what the outcome's going to be. Now, I mean, when it comes to the comic book world, and I think you and I agree on this, I mean, characters come and go. I mean, characters die and characters come back. And now, I'm not trying to diminish that by any means, because I know everybody gets their attachment and everybody loves their core characters. But, you know, I've seen a lot of people jump on Tom King with this first issue. And while I understand that there's a certain amount of criticism that's involved, give the storyline time to hash out, to understand what's at stake here and what's taking place before you jump all over the author. You know what I mean? And I found that a lot when this issue was released, and that's actually why I waited a day or so to read it, because I mean there was a lot of negative flashbacks or a lot of negative kickback from this, and I don't understand why. I mean, I know that people are sad because of the Wally thing, but I mean, we don't even know what's happened yet. We don't even know what's going to happen yet. So
right. I gotta remind people to think back to when Omega Men came out, and in Omega Men #1, it looked like Kyle Rayner had been beheaded.
Right.
But what Tom King tends to do is he doesn't start the story from the beginning. He kind of starts the story a little ways in, and so we're in the aftermath of the attack, and we don't really know what happened with the attack yet. And so are either one of them really dead? It certainly looks that way, but it's certainly early on. We've got 8 more issues to go, and it could be a psych out. It could be maybe Superman is being made to see something that they want him to see, or it could be the truth. But again, we're also dealing with a situation where Booster Gold's involved, so time travel's a bit of a thing to think about here as well. So who knows? Is it the death of Wally again? I don't know. Is it the death of Arsenal? I don't know. But the reason why I wanted to talk about this was, Phil, did you see in the one page where there's a full page spread of Superman hovering in the air and he's using his X-ray vision, and you're seeing kind of it from a distance, but then there's a circle that shows what Superman's looking at. Did you notice something in particular in that panel?
Well, I see. Who's the guy with the? Is that red? I'm not sure what Patriot. Something Patriot maybe.
Citizen Steel and
Citizen Steel. Okay.
Hotspot. But look under Superman's left arm.
Oh, there is a Green Lantern emblem there. I did not see that.
There's a Green Lantern logo there. Correct. So
darn, I didn't even see that.
Is it a dead Green Lantern? Is it somebody wearing a Green Lantern shirt? Who knows?
Well, I mean, if he's doing an X-ray, this is supposed to be a superimposed image of what's taking place on the ground, I would assume.
Yes, yep. And so you're seeing what Superman's supervision is seeing, and you see some wing feathers on the ground above near Superman's head. But the Green Lantern logo obviously is cause for concern.
Well, I wonder who not only that, but I wonder who the feathers belong to. Maybe Hawk, maybe Dove. I mean, Hawk or Dove.
Somebody said maybe it was Azrael. I don't know. I haven't seen where that character is these days. I don't know, and it's hard to say. It could be somebody wearing a Green Lantern shirt. I really don't know. Obviously the red herring is that it's Kyle because they tease that. But
it's funny. I read this today and I did not even pick up on that. And when you started talking about, or when you sent me the notes on this and it says, is there a dead GL? I was like, I didn't see that. What's he talking about? And then now that you bring this up, I'm like, oh crap.
Right, because there's nothing else in the issue that gives you any indication that somebody there's died. But obviously you're cutting back and forth between those interviews and Harlequin having her conversation with Booster Gold in the fight and Superman. So you're cutting back and forth between all 3 scenes. So you're not seeing everything. You're only seeing the parts that Tom King wants you to see at this point.
Exactly. But he's good like that. He's a good writer. And I liked it. I liked the first issue. I liked when they showed the panels where the heroes were talking out their emotional turmoils. I thought that was really interesting. It was kind of like a purge for them. I'm a little concerned about the Harley and Booster dynamic. I mean, Skeets isn't there, so obviously, what happened to Skeets? Where'd he go to? But no more than that, what's her beef with Booster? Do you have any idea? I'm not sure if there's any kind of backstory there, or if it hasn't played out yet. But she's got a strong beef with Booster, it seems.
Well, and it sounds like she says that he's the one that did it.
Yeah, and I don't know. Booster doesn't strike me as somebody who would do this kind of thing when he's always wanted to be the person that was involved in the hero thing. But
yeah,
then again, you never know. I mean, this is a new kind of story here, and I think Tom King is playing it loose, and I would too. I mean, but everybody who knew what Heroes in Crisis was coming out already went into this knowing that there was a lot at stake and that this was a different type of book. I'm just trying to understand why fans didn't already know that or have a preconceived notion of that when they first read it. But I thought it was great. The artwork was great. Clay Mann really killed it on this artwork.
Right. Well, I think it's funny. The reaction that I'm seeing with this series is very reminiscent of the reaction that occurred when Identity Crisis came out. And a lot of people have been calling this Identity Crisis 2.0.
And that makes sense because that started out with Digby's wife dying, but and that's actually a good call. But here we are. I loved it. I think it's great. I'm looking forward to it.
I think the art is great. I'm interested in the story. It's obviously a very personal one for Tom King. I don't know. You and I were speculating a couple of episodes ago about what we thought was going to happen with Kyle, because he's one of the rumored people that is a potential either murderer, victim, or accusee. And seeing the Green Lantern logo there, I don't know. It doesn't look at the logo from Kyle's outfit.
No, it doesn't. It looks different.
Could it be Simon Baz?
But it doesn't look like his logo either, though.
Right. So I don't know what to think. Could it be somebody else wearing a Green Lantern shirt? Sure, it could be.
But what would that? I mean, but then again, that brings up the point of why. Then that would mean a trick on. That would be a trick on a symbol, because then you're like, well, why would he include just that symbol so vaguely underneath his left arm, out of view, where a lot of people didn't even pick it up? I didn't even pick it up.
Yeah, I think it could be just gamesmanship on his part. Because if you go back and think about Identity Crisis, I just recently reread that, and when you're reading that story, you didn't know what to think all the way through that story. Right. As there were different murder attempts on different people. It really kept you on the edge. So is part of this just to make you think it's Kyle, because that's what they teased? You know what I mean?
Sure.
Is it marketing? I don't know. But the fact that there's a Green Lantern logo there is obviously cause for concern.
Well, and he says they're all gone. So that leads me to believe that Clark, or Superman, whatever you want to call it, actually knows who all these people are on the ground.
Right. So, I don't know. I don't know what we don't know yet. We won't know until the story unfolds. But boy, that made my curiosity peak a bit. And we've talked earlier. We don't want to see anybody's favorite character be killed off, and we're dealing with a story that could have time travel involved. And like I said, it could be maybe Superman's not really seeing reality. Don't know.
Yeah, that's been played before. So I mean, it could be. Who knows? Maybe there's a tie-in with Cyborg Superman.
I don't know. But, and that's why I bring it up, because some people may not have caught that Green Lantern logo there, because it is, unless you're really looking at the art, the art is designed to draw you towards seeing Hotspot and Citizen Steel and Lagoon Boy and so on. The art is intentionally done to make you look in that direction.
Sure.
That if you don't,
I didn't see it until like I said, until you pointed it out. I would have never caught that.
And there's somebody else there. If you look by Superman's leg, there's another. There's like a leg or an arm there.
Yeah, I've seen that. That's really vague. You can't even tell what that could be.
Right. So who knows? But the other thing to talk about is Doomsday Clock number 7, and it seems like it's been quite a while since there was an issue of this book. And I think I mentioned to you off mic that I feel like I need to go back and read 1 through 6 all over again to remember what the heck is going on with this book. But you haven't read this issue yet, so you said you don't mind if I spoil it. There's a lot here about Alan Scott and the Justice Society, and one of the things that people have been talking about for a while is what happened to the Justice Society. They disappeared out of history, and Jeff Johns, being Jeff Johns, has found a way to explain why they are not part of history. And it talks about Dr. Manhattan and witnessing in one version of history what happens with Alan Scott and finding the lantern and saving his life from the train wreck. And he talks about how he kind of goes back again, but he moves the lantern out of his reach, preventing Alan Scott from becoming Green Lantern and preventing the creation of the Justice Society.
That's really cool.
So that's what's happened. That's why we don't have a Justice Society in our timeline. We don't know exactly why he did it. That remains to be seen. But it will be interesting to see, because what's interesting is that Johnny Thunder has found Alan Scott's battery, and he seems to recall it being something that he knows something about. So even though history's been changed, Johnny Thunder has an idea of what that history in that timeline was like to some degree. He knows the lantern is important, because what ends up happening in this new timeline is the lantern is created and it's found and turned into a lamp by a mental patient, and it disappears in history, and it's found later in a dumpster by Johnny Thunder.
That's really, really cool. I've always been a big fan of Alan Scott. I've always liked Alan Scott. I always wish they'd use him more. I always wish they'd incorporate him into the Green Lantern title book more, but they never did, you know?
Well, the big thing, the conversation I keep hearing a lot about now is that something's going to happen and Dr. Manhattan's going to go back and fix this, and we're going to get the Justice Society back.
Well, that would be cool. I mean, they were cool. I really enjoyed reading about them. I really enjoyed their old stories. But, you know, if you notice, DC is starting to pull a lot of their back characters, you know, the second tier, third tier characters off the shelf and bring them back into the mainstream. You know, you start seeing there's a lot of stuff that's coming out in the solicits, a lot of newer titles that are coming out, and a lot of older characters are starting to be reinvented, and maybe that's what DC's plan is.
Yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. You know, it's interesting to compare Doomsday Clock and Heroes in Crisis because of the tones of the book. They're both kind of dark, but at the same time, we're finding out what happened with something that's maybe potentially restored, and the other book is about taking some things away, maybe.
Yeah, I don't know. I do need to go back and read a couple of the Doomsday Clock. You know, I hate to say it, but I was pretty excited for it at first when it came out, but then a couple issues in, I just found myself really didn't know if I was engaging with it or not. Now, that could have a lot to do with the fact that I wasn't a huge Watchmen fan, just kind of like a haphazard Watchmen fan. But, you know, and then third issue and fourth issue, and I just found myself, you know, I don't understand where they're going to go with the storyline. You know, it was all a big lead up, but how does this impact the big picture? You know, how does this impact what's going to be happening later on in the year with the changing of the guard, with Green Lantern or whatnot, or the new Justice Leagues that are all being revamped and stuff. So I just kind of felt like this was going to be a lead up into that, but it just seems like a standalone, but I'm not sure what they're trying to do with it.
Yeah, I agree. I think like Watchmen, it's kind of a dense read. So it's one of those books that I don't think stands up to reading floppy. I think the floppy reading experience is going to be a lot different than reading it in trade or reading all the issues together back to back.
Sure. You're right. You're totally right.
But, all right, well, thank you for those that stuck around to listen to it. I'd like to hear what everybody else's thoughts are on both those books. And we'll be back in just a few minutes to wrap things up.
All right, Myron, another one for the books. We had some Circle of Fire. We had some Death in the Heroes in Crisis. We had Doomsday Clock and Alan Scott. And we had what is close to the end of the Green Lantern book entirely with Dan Jurgens. What a night. Yeah,
you know, and we're not done yet. There's still 2 more issues of Green Lanterns to go before we hit the big launch with the Green Lantern. And, you know, they just announced today that they're going to allow comic shops to sell the first issue of the Green Lantern at midnight on launch day.
Oh yeah, I'm going. I'll be there.
So I'm hoping my shop does something for it.
Yeah, I'll have to find out if mine does or not.
Yeah, I'm hoping. But anyway, we will be back in a couple of weeks. We had a little bit of a gap this time because of the difference in time between the books, and then you and I both had a couple of hectic weekends where we couldn't get together and talk. But we'll be back, probably 2 weeks or so, and we will be back with another episode and be chatting Green Lantern again, and we hope you stick around to join us.
All right, we'll see you guys soon.
All right, till next time, keep those power rings charged, be good to each other, and make every day your brightest day. The Podcast of OA is the official podcast of the blog of OA and a proud member of the Comics Podcast Network. Share your comments and questions by calling the show's voicemail line at 406-POD-OA. That's 406-763-6362. You can send your emails to podcast@blogofoa.com. You can also find the Blog of OA and the Podcast of OA on Twitter and Facebook. Green Lantern and other related characters are the copyrighted property of DC Comics Incorporated and are used without permission. The Blog of OA and the Podcast of OA are fan productions and do not claim any ownership over the Green Lantern or any other copyrighted properties.